maybe they were going through a divorce. Maybe they were splitting up the relationship. They maybe had a long-term relationship they were splitting up, or maybe they were just really thinking about it. Perhaps they were quite unhappy in the relationship and they had one foot out the door when the death happened. Some people's marriages were on the rocks before the death. But the reality was he wasn't out of the relationship when he began an emotional affair with you. Aside from the widowed issue, that's your number one thing that you should be addressing with him. And the information you had in front of you at the time was not that they were dead. Well, hello everyone. This is Sevilla I Love, and here we are on this channel getting back to living and loving life again after a major life-altering loss. If you're new to my work, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a coach, consultant, and spiritual guide for widows and widowers and people that are trying to love them. Now, today I've got someone that has written into me and has given me permission to post her particular dilemma to the channel. So that's what we're going to be doing. So let's get into it. This is something people have a hard time talking about because this comes with a layer of shame and guilt. And we're going to talk about it. This gal writes in with this particular dilemma in the widower that she's dating. So let me read her letter and then we're going to get into it. This gal writes in and she says, I wanted to thank you so much for your videos. At first, I really struggled to find resources about dating a widower, and it's been so helpful to have your perspective as a therapist and a widow yourself. Thank you. I also wanted to see if you have any advice about dealing with the hot and cold of dating a widower. I've been dating a wonderful guy for about 4 months. His long-term girlfriend died suddenly early this year. He and I were best friends before she died, and kind of in love with each other even then, which makes things complicated, adds a layer of guilt for him. I've been trying to let him be the one to guide how quickly our relationship moves, and he's initiated almost every big step, including telling me a few times that he wants to marry me. Because we're such good friends, we have great communication for the most part. When we're together, things are incredible and I feel so secure. But when we're apart, his texting is not good. We had a great conversation about it recently, but now I feel even more attuned to how painful his grief is and how complex his feelings are about moving on from his former girlfriend. From what I understand, this seems to be pretty common for widowed people in new relationships. Do you have any advice for how to navigate it other than being patient and trying not to take it personally unless he tells me it's personal? Thank you so much for the important work that you do. That's the end of the letter. So thank you so much for writing in. Excuse me for being the word police, but I do need to address this. This is something that people often do. It's not former girlfriend or ex-wife. It's late is the proper term, late girlfriend or late wife when there's been a death. Okay, because ex or former implies that there was a choice involved somehow on the behalf of someone. Okay, so I just want to say that before we move forward. The relationship started with an emotional infidelity. Now, hear me out. This isn't a judgment. Okay, I don't know you. I don't know your life. I don't know his life. I don't know what their marriage or their relationship was like. Okay, it could have been fraught with pain and peril, and she may have been a wild, raging, cheating alcoholic that caused him great suffering. I don't know. But the reality was he wasn't out of the relationship when he began an emotional affair with you. Because when you say that he and I were kind of in love before she died, that tells me that there was an emotional affair. Okay.
Hold on, quick pause. People ask me all the time if I work with clients one-on-one. Yes, I do. I offer private coaching and consultation, and you can book with me anytime using the link in the description below. Now, back to the video.
Okay. I'm assuming there wasn't a physical manifestation of the affair yet at that point. So what I want to suggest is that the emotional affair is something he would have been dealing with even had she lived, and he ended the relationship appropriately, recognizing his eyes were going elsewhere, that his heart was going elsewhere, that he was ready to end the relationship, and that he did so respectfully before moving into deeper relationship with you. Okay, that would have been the integral thing to do. He didn't get the opportunity to do that. The question I would ask is, what was his intention? Was his intention to end the relationship? Was his intention to move forward with a clean slate and give you the opportunity to be his new love in a new life in a way that honors the past by making a clean break and honors the future? That's what I would want to know. What was his intention at the time? And not just his intention, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions, my dear, but was his intention linked to a plan of action to end the relationship with her? Okay, this is something you need to ask yourself, because the way you get them is the way you lose them. Okay, say that with a grain of salt, because again, I don't know the entirety of the situation. So get that. That's information that you need if you don't have it already. And you need to consider that as a data point for yourself. Okay, in terms of if you want to move forward with this relationship, because you have to ask yourself, can I trust him in the future? If he says he loves me and wants to marry me, will I have a little bit of insecurity in my heart when he gets a new secretary or he makes a new female friend? Because what I'm hearing is this is a guy that thinks it's okay to have female friends and that you think it's okay to have male friends. Do you see what I'm saying? And so if this is an okay thing for both of you, then is this going to run risk for insecurity for you both in the future? Okay, this is something that's very important for you to consider. Now, I don't want to lay judgment on what's right and what's wrong for you and for him. But in my 23 years plus and 54 years of lived experience, what I know is that we can easily fool ourselves. And aside from the widowed issue, that's your number one thing that you should be addressing with him and with yourself. Okay, so lacking any further detail, allow me to move on to the next point. The guilt that he's dealing with. Okay, so let's imagine he didn't have one foot out the door and you didn't have a relationship before. Let's say you were coworkers and he thought you were an attractive woman or somebody that he knew from whatever. And he'd eyeballed you, but that was about it. Okay, so let me move from that context. So now you move in to relationship. He lost his partner at the beginning of this year. Right now it's 2025. So given that he lost her at the beginning of this year, it hasn't yet been a year. He's going through a lot of complex emotions, not just the grief of having stepped out on her, but he's feeling, now any widowed person is going to feel guilty for loving again. Okay, because if this is a long-term girlfriend, at some point he had promised himself in his life to her to some major extent, if she was a long-term girlfriend. And he had intentions for her for the future. Maybe he didn't know how to move out of the relationship. Maybe he felt stuck. Who knows what it was. But at some point in time, he had future intentions for the relationship. And when you lose someone, what happens is you realize what you lost. Okay. The things that you didn't like about the person somehow become less important. This is so different from a breakup. This is so different from a divorce. And this is what makes that so complicated, because even if the person was moving into divorce, if a death happens during that time, it almost removes all of the not all of it, but a good chunk of the intention the person had to live, because now the choice has been taken away. And some people moving through divorce or breakup may even hold in the back of their minds a hope for reconciliation someday, a hope for a continued friendship, a hope for something, right? And death steals all of that hope away. It steals the person that shared that memory of all of those years with you, even if you want it out of the relationship, okay? It's like they no longer exist on the planet, so it makes you feel like that life that you lived with them somehow, does it lose its meaning? Did that even happen? Like that is it's just so heavy of an emotion that the widowed person feels, okay? And you no longer have a choice to get it back, and it makes you question, did I make a mistake in wanting to divorce the person? And you may have 50 damn good reasons that the breakup was necessary, was on its way, or was in process. But the widowed person will question every single one of those reasons, because death brings a different ending. Those things that the person did that drove them crazy, they might actually miss now because it'll never exist again. And there's something about the finality of death that brings a level of grief and heaviness to the heart that's very, very, very hard to explain to anyone else. And if they've been choosing the separation, the divorce, the breakup, had one foot out, the guilt's going to weigh heavier on them. But here's what I need to say to you as the person dating this. This is not your burden to carry. This belongs to the widowed person. And if you're dating them very early on because they felt like they could potentially be ready for this, his excitement in you when he was one foot out the door was the was a future he may have been imagining that didn't involve a death, a real death, okay? That involved the family and the history they shared together and any choice in the matter. Like that is gone. That is gone, the choice. And so is the joy that he might have gotten had he made a clean break or had a person had a clean divorce from someone. And so now what they really need is time to grieve. It, and so I want to suggest to you that you might consider taking a break with this guy. Okay? Give him time to grieve, because him leaving the relationship is not the same as her dying. It changed everything. And it doesn't mean you might not potentially have a future together. It doesn't mean that this man can't love you. It doesn't mean that he can't bring himself fully into a relationship with you in the future. But could you consider, maybe even as a couple, to let this guy have some space to grieve it out, to feel all the feelings? Because when somebody dies, there's no room for anything else. And immediately after the death, he's trying to love you with the same intention that he had and the same excitement he had when he was one foot out the door. Okay. And that feeling doesn't exist anymore because the world in which he lived then no longer exists because she died. And that changed everything. And that's not your fault. It's not your burden to carry. He needs to take some time. 6 months, a year, like what? To not have to care about, and I want to say care about you at all, but I mean not to have to attend to the needs of a relationship, because he's not going to be able to give you what you need He's not going to be able to give you what he could have given you had he left the relationship and she lived. Okay, this is not the same, and you can't expect it to be the same. You cannot treat him with the same expectation you would have had he left the relationship and she lived. This wasn't his, this, her dying was also not his fault. He was also not expecting to have to deal with the end of the relationship this way. And all of the emotions that it brings up for him are completely different than the emotions he would have experienced had the relationship just ended. Okay. It's two totally different things. You cannot treat them the same. And because you can't, or shouldn't, in my opinion, is if you could allow this person time, this widowed person time. Trust that if this is love for you and him truly, if this is the universe aligning to set you both up for true love and companionship and whatever the future could hold for you, then it's worth waiting for. He needs time to heal. He needs a convalescence, and he may need to be forced into it. Forced into it meaning you put a strong boundary and you say, hey, I love you and I think we could have a fabulous future together. And I want that. That's my desire. I'm wild about you. I'm crazy about you. And right now, the way you had intended to leave the relationship is not what you got. What happened was you had a death. And you have to have time to properly grieve that. And the only way you can do it is if you have all the space in the world to dedicate to just that. If he could get a good therapist, you know, if he could get on my channel, listen to all my videos, do something for himself, read books, you know, something to deal with his while you step out of the picture. That's my recommendation. In order to respect the possibility that you guys could have something really true, lasting, and pure together. Let him deal with his guilt. Let him deal with the grief. Let him see a therapist. Let him talk to grief groups. Let him meet with other men who've been widowed. And then meet back up again in 6 months. You know, if you're worth it, if he's worth it, you deserve to be fully and wholly loved, not to be his nursemaid, especially since you guys were emotional affair partners. This is something he needs to manage, and he needs to be able to come to you whole and clear in himself, straight about how he feels and what he wants for his future. And he can't do that fully unless he only has that to deal with. You can't make that choice for him, but you can make the choice for yourself to step back. Now, I've seen this before. This very similar situation where a person was in the process of a divorce or breakup. I've seen several different scenarios, and they had somebody, because, you know, maybe sometimes when people are divorcing, they have, you know, they're like, okay, we're divorcing, we're not divorced yet, but we're going to start dating other people. Okay, so they may be in that type of stage, which happens. This is common these days. So it's not a full-on secretive affair. That's just, we're not legally divorced yet. And in those cases, right, it can hit the same kind of way. And that person still needs time to grieve, okay? Even if they had intention to leave, because it's totally different now. I can't stress that enough. And if anybody tells you that this is the old relationship and then you just need to be able to get on with it, and they liken it to a divorce as if a divorce had happened, then I want you to put the screech brakes on and think twice. Honor yourself, honor him, honor the possibility of what could be. Time and space for him. You go take care of yourself. Go be fabulous. Go get more fabulous. Do lots of self-care. Do things that you enjoy. Make yourself even more alive, more interesting, more wonderful. So if this relationship is true, and when he's able to come back to you, he'll come back stronger. He'll come back more clear. He'll come back more devoted. A man needs to have a vision for himself, and he needs that time in the cave to lick his wounds and to understand who he is now outside of the context of this loss. So he's got something solid to give you. If he doesn't feel like he's a whole, solid ass man in your presence, he's going to withdraw. He's going to not show up. He's going to be lackadaisical because he's not sure of who he is and what he wants. And that's got nothing to do with you, your beauty, your power, your worthiness, any of it. Nothing to do with you. And everything to do with what he needs to work out. Okay, and this is what I would want to say to him or to anybody in their shoes, because that was for you, the person dating the widowed person. Now, for the widowed, what I want to say is you didn't know. You didn't know this was going to happen. You didn't know. You were planning your future and your life. You had a vision for yourself. And the unexpected occurred totally outside of your control. To imagine that if you would have just stayed in the relationship, that they wouldn't have died because maybe you wouldn't have done this, or they wouldn't have gone there, or maybe you were sneaking out of the house, or maybe you were in a fight and they took off in a drive and they had a car accident. There's a 50,000 ways you could blame yourself for this death. And the truth is, a big part of grieving is coming to terms with the reality that there's very little in life that we can control for. Very little, very, very little. And that which we can control for is always ourselves and how we respond to a situation. And if you need to take yourself down 50 different roads of how you think you could have prevented this death, then you do that. I recommend doing it with a good grief and loss therapist. Going down the road of what ifs until you have no more roads to go down or till you've exhausted it to death, literally, then you do that. I do that with my clients all the time. We talk about all the what ifs because the control factor is an issue that we have to come to stark acceptance that we can't. And we may not be able to accept it until we do exhaust every imaginable possibility. And then we still might carry it. Because carrying the guilt of maybe thinking we could have prevented the death, or we could have done something different, and maybe would have had a different outcome, is the brain's way of trying to prevent for future difficulties, future danger. If I review all the missteps, then I can prevent it in the future. Right? This is a survival, so it's built, hardwired into our reptilian brains. So it's okay that you do it. You do it until you don't have to do it anymore. Okay, so number 2, you were doing the best you could at the time with the outlook that you had in the moment. Okay, at the time, there was no change in sight. There was no hope for the relationship. There was a trail of behaviors and problems between the two of you, and all of those were still true when the person died. They were still true. What changed is your awareness of all the other things that are now gone forever, that wouldn't have come to your consciousness had they lived. Okay. They may have been things you never realized had they lived. And this is why it's so different. Okay. Divorce versus death. Separation versus death. You miss very different things. Your focus is completely different. And what that means is when you had one foot out or you were divorcing, is that you were living your life with the information you had in front of you at the time. And the information you had in front of you at the time was not that they were dead. Okay? That was not a data piece you had. And so you can't hold yourself accountable for how you dealt with it without that vital piece of information. You just can't. And if you do it until you don't need to do it anymore. Okay? Exhaust that too. So, number 3, as I'd mentioned, that life is about learning that we can't control for outcomes. It's coming to acceptance and peace with that, because life is a series of changes, one damn thing after another. And it's about learning to be flexible. It's about learning to accept what we can't accept. And I struggle with the word accept because it almost sounds like, it's okay. Well, it's not okay, not at all. But accept is, I accept that I can't accept it, as Eckhart Tolle, very famous author of The Power of Now, says, accept that you can't accept. That, miraculously, will move you into peace. And that might be what's needed from you right now. So number 4. Now, can you imagine that if that person had lived, things would have been along the same trajectory? The same trajectory that made you want to leave to begin with. It's very unlikely that that would have changed. Now, I know that the death brings that feeling of no more choice, and that's the grief. That's the grief. Because if they'd lived, there could have been a reconciliation. You could have been friends. You could have done something different, like anything. And you wouldn't be dealing with, some of you out there had kids and all that, like this brought a whole different bag of dirty, nasty, stinky, smelly worms to your life. And you weren't prepared to deal with this. You were prepared to deal with the fallout of the divorce or the separation. You weren't prepared for the death. And that's not your fault. Nobody's prepared because you don't know what it's going to feel like. You've never been through something like this before. So number 5 is that you cannot reasonably hold yourself accountable for something you didn't know was going to happen. I'll say that again. You can't hold yourself accountable for something you didn't know was going to happen. You were planning on the future. You were maybe planning to deal with the painful fallout of the divorce. You were getting all your ducks in a row. You were doing the best you could with what you had. And when you were put on a completely different track that you had no provisions for, can't blame yourself for that. Can't blame yourself for not knowing. And that's really where the work needs to be done. Because if you're dealing with massive grief, a massive amount of guilt along with the grief, Grief is normal, but the guilt part in relation to the separation, the divorce, that specific part of guilt, okay, is that's where the work needs to be done. That you didn't know this was going to happen. And that is where you have to find forgiveness for yourself. Because I guarantee you, your loved ones on their other side have already forgiven you because they don't want to carry that mess with them. Okay? We leave all that negative stuff behind when we leave this world. We really do. We take the good things with us. The love that you had with them, the good times that you had, the way you enhanced each other's lives, or maybe you brought new children into the world, or whatever it was that you did together that was good. They got to take that with them. You're left dealing with the mess. And if you tackle that piece first, forgive yourself for not being psychic. Because even if you were psychic and predicted a death, you don't know what's going to happen until it happens. That's still not knowing. You only know something once you witness it. Okay. So what you believed at the time was that the relationship was on its last legs. You were on your way out. You were divorcing. And you had all the reasons why. And they were good reasons or you wouldn't have been leaving. Okay. If you can spend time with this aspect, it's going to free you up to deal with the different aspect of the loss, which is honorably grieving them. You have a right to grieve them, even if you were on your way out. You do. You have a right to grieve them, even if you were on your way out. So let yourself, okay? And it might be too early for you to pour yourself into another relationship. If that person is meant for your future, then you want to meet them with the wholeness of your intention, with the wholeness of your love, with a healed aspect of knowing what you want, what you need, and where you want this next stage of your life to go. You can't do that until you clarify for yourself and allow yourself to work through that guilt and then let it go. If it doesn't serve you, and I guarantee you they're not carrying any of that in the next world, even if they see you and the choices that you've made, the judgments that you're putting on it are yours. It's not theirs. They see, but there isn't this level of judgment that we imagine. Because they're in paradise. Like they are in the lap of love and peace and like they're good. You, on the other hand, are suffering. So don't suffer because of them, because they're good. You are not. This is something you can heal from. You can release the guilt and the grief. If you need to beat yourself up about it, beat yourself up about it. But don't do it forever. Okay? Don't do it forever. Don't do it for a really long time. This is what you do with all of these emotions is you clear all the space out, you move people out of your life, like a new love that you may very much want, but you can't honorably give them what they deserve to have and what you deserve to have. So you clear out the space respectfully and you hold up, live your life, do the things you need to do. But emotionally, you've got to feel all of that. You've got to feel all the guilt. You've got to feel all the shame. And then you've got to let it go. You've got to feel the grief and the sadness. And you've got to talk to them. You got to cry. You got to go to their gravesite. You got to write them a letter. Write them a letter and you let it burn. You got to ask for forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself. You've got to do all that work. Got to clear it out. Okay? Clear it out. Because you do deserve to be happy again. You do deserve to be loved again. You're not perfect. You were a human being in a human relationship, trying to do the best you could with what you had. Even if the choices you made, you feel regret over. It's done. Your future choices, you can do better. You can allow this, what you've lived through, to inform who you want to be as a man, who you want to be as a woman. And you embody that now. Okay, bring that. Don't waste it. Okay, don't waste it beating yourself up. Because that's a waste of energy. What you need to do is allow it to transform you into a better man, into a better woman. That's how you honor the loved one that died. That's how you transform the energy. That's how you redeem yourself. Accountability, forgiveness, asking of it, receiving it, because it's given to you. They forgive you. You have to forgive yourself. Somebody said once that the biggest sin that we can't be forgiven for is the one we can't forgive ourselves for. So this is your work to do, nobody else's. And it's okay to forgive yourself. You're a mere human being on a path of discovery, recovery, redemption. The human experience. You're not above it. You're not below it. It's with you. Take responsibility for that. Do what you need to do to heal. And healing doesn't look like you forget them, that you never love them again, that you don't think about them. Not what healing means. Healing means that you've had integration, that you no longer live with debilitating guilt, debilitating sadness, that you have more room in your life for love and light and joy. And you'll know you're healed because you've got room for it. You feel the joy. You feel the happiness more often than you feel the sadness. And you have room in your life to be able to give yourself fully to another person without the attachment that holds your heart back, that chains your heart to the guilt and regret. Because that's a part of you that you can transform by being the man you're capable of being, by being the woman you're capable of being. You do that, you break the chains, you free yourself up, live a life of love, of redemption, a life that you deserve to have, that you all deserve to have.
Hold on, quick pause. People ask me all the time if I work with clients one-on-one. Yes, I do. I offer private coaching and consultation, and you can book with me anytime using the link in the description below. Now, back to the video.